Welcome to this published author's interview. My name is Kenneth Muyingo, and with me I have a special guest that I'm going to be interviewing. First, I just want to mention, if you watch this interview and you would like to write a book yourself, there's a link with the interview for you to join the group, become an author, and write your first book to connect with like-minded people who are doing the same. And with that said, I would like to get into the interview by asking my guest to say hello to our viewers and listeners and to introduce herself.
Um, Hi, my name is Julia Siegel, and I'm here today to talk about my book, Foolish Insanity.
Wow. Thank you so much, Julia, for making time for the interview. So if
Yeah, no problem.
watching the interview and they would like to know more about Julia Siegel, what can you share with them?
Um, well, I mean, that depends on what they would like to know. I do have a Facebook page for my work as an author that they can follow, as well as looking me up on Goodreads and Tumblr and Amazon.
Amazing.
So,
We will share those links with the viewers and listeners. Thank you for making time for the interview once again. So tell us about your book. What's the title again?
so the title is Foolish Insanity, and hold on, just ignore that. um, it is about I'm trying to think the best way to describe it because it kind of jumps around a little bit and the
Take your
focus kind of
time.
shifts among different characters. But the best way to describe it would be it's about this girl in 19th century London who is locked up in an insane asylum. And it's about her and all of the relationships with the men in her life, both the good and bad, and how those relationships have affect her life and, the outcome of her life.
Huh.
So,
And it's called Foolish Insanity.
yes.
Wow, amazing. And what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I I distinctly remember it was fall of 2016, and I was going through some of the biggest, most eventful, most stressful time in my life because uh, for a solid like 2 months or so, I was completely consumed between grad school and I was in a production of Sweeney Todd at the time.
Huh.
So, um, and so because of that, uh, there was so much, the doing Sweeney Todd was such a positive experience, and it's still probably one of my favorite experiences, that one of my favorite shows that I've ever worked on. And grad school, on the other hand, was not. I did not enjoy it. And it was it was a really stressful time. I didn't have any time for myself. And I felt a lot of like, so I felt a lot of mental strain at that time. And I remember distinctly there was one instance during rehearsal where, because I was in the ensemble for Sweeney Todd, so which meant that at one point there's an insane asylum scene, which meant that those of us in the ensemble had to do insanity practice, where we had to like tap into our inner, crazy person for that scene. And and so, and that ended up turning into, I was able to channel my frustration with grad school into that. And then just um, between that and then being inspired by the story and the aesthetic. And while I was doing Sweeney Todd, my friend was also in a different production of the same show. So like just gathering different different aesthetics from my production versus her production. And, the mental and just, the mental wearing down during grad school, balancing that, it just sort of felt like, it just kind of all like came together.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there's some more personal experiences. A bunch of the characters were inspired by the different people who were in my life at the time. And
Wow.
yeah.
Great. So Sweeney Todd, is it a production? So you
It's a
were doing,
musical.
it's a musical. Wow. That's amazing. I have it on my wish list. That's one of the things I would
Oh,
like to do, to be in a musical. Yeah. Wow. And and so you have done that, and from what I hear, it was like a great inspiration for you to even get into writing Foolish Insanity. Wow,
yeah.
amazing. And like, I'm listening to the story about the grad school and then the production for Sweeney Todd. Um,
Mhm.
I'm curious, at what point did you feel uh, I'm clear on what the topic of this is going to be? How did you choose the topic for the book?
Well, because I take mental health very seriously, and I feel like not everybody does.
Yeah,
And so, because my mental health was so negatively affected by my grad school experience,
yeah,
that um, that I felt like you know I I felt like I was sort of trapped in that asylum
yeah,
as well. And so um, because of that,
yeah,
I felt as if I was, being weighted down. Plus,
yeah,
also women during that time period, if they had any mental health issues whatsoever, it was automatically labeled as female hysteria.
yeah,
And so, and which the main character in my book is diagnosed as having that, when really um, she has given her experiences, which we later find out about halfway through the book. Because for the first half of the book, you don't know why she's there. And
yeah,
then there are a few chapters of flashbacks where it explains what happened to her leading up to the asylum.
yeah,
And so when you read that section, she has every reason to be upset.
yeah,
And um, and yeah, she has every reason to be upset. And what really is female hysteria is just a depression, is really just, major depression for the
yeah,
most part, and not being able to receive the help that, thankfully is more accessible today, but
yeah.
even, still, you know, there could still be improvements on, the stigma against mental health. And
And then, wow. And this is a
yeah.
very relevant and very important topic right now in the world that we're living in today, looking at how the world has been disrupted by the global pandemic. Many people are finding themselves in tough places, most especially with mental health. And um, if somebody's watching us and they find that they are in this place and they feel like they are struggling with mental health issues and they're sort of afraid of being stigmatized or not being understood, what would you share with them, knowing what you know?
I would say the first step is to ask for help, because if you don't reach out to anyone, it's only going to build up and get worse. And then it could, come out in all the wrong ways.
Yeah,
So, look into, first of all, if, you know, go to any trusted family or friends, um, seek, try to seek any like psychological help, like therapy, possibly even medication.
yeah.
And I'm speaking all of this from my personal experience.
Wow.
So
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Julia. That's very powerful. And so you decided that this is a very important topic for you, and that was an easy pick because of the journey and the experience that you had with that. And when you look back on the process of writing the book, and now that you're looking at it as something that is already done, do you consider yourself as a naturally talented writer, or would you say that writing is a skill that you've developed over time?
I would say both, because I've been writing I've been writing stories and I've loved to write for as long as I can remember. This was, out of all the stories I've ever written, I actually have a document that I started in high school with that's like 30 pages long, all of different story ideas that I've come up with over the years. But because I was always so busy with school, I never got around to writing any of them. And then finally, once I finished my undergrad, then it's like, okay, now I can finally start writing all of these. And at the time, this was the uh, most recent story idea that I had written down. So, which is why I started with this one.
Yeah,
But, at the same time, I look back at the stories I've written in high school and college. And, when I wrote them during that time,
yeah,
I thought, oh, okay, this is, like, I can't believe how this is turning out. I want to get this published. And
yeah,
now looking back as an adult, I'm like, no, like, obviously there's some potential there, but considering
yeah,
that these were stories written by a teenager,
yeah,
uh, but that, and especially like all the grammatical stuff I've had to learn and improve on, and all
yeah,
the story structure stuff, it really, like anything, it takes practice.
yeah,
And also, what I feel helped me was there were a couple years where I worked as a creative writing teacher. I
yeah,
worked at this one place where, that focused on teaching creative writing to kids. So because I was teaching them what to do, I ended up learning a few things myself and applying
yeah.
that to my writing. And I happened to be working that job while I was writing this.
Oh,
So,
amazing.
yeah.
So 30 stories. You have 30 stories, Julia. That,
Most of them a bunch of them that I came up with in high school, I'm glad I never wrote, because
yeah,
looking back, you know, I'm not
yeah,
going to write them now.
yeah,
um, and also a lot of the stories do overlap. And like, I've noticed there are some stories that are basically kind of the same thing, just with slight tweaks. So it's like, I've been taking like I've been taking elements from different story ideas and just putting them into one coherent story, rather than, a bunch of smaller, weaker ones.
wow, amazing. So you mentioned about grad school and then the production of
Hmm.
the musical, and that was in 2016.
Right.
And when you look back on your journey, you mentioned some of the things that happened, but is there something specific that you can point to and say, this is it? And the question is, what would you tell me is the one thing that has happened to you personally that has had the greatest impact on your writing?
Well, hon- honestly, I'm not really sure. I spent about 2 years just writing this.
Yeah,
Um, and plus it took almost another year just to have friends read it and edit it, and go through and edit it over and over again, and actually go through the publishing process.
yeah,
So I think because it took such a long time,
yeah.
it um yeah, because it took such a long time, I can't really pinpoint, because it's not like, I just sat down, typed it up, and then in a few months
I
got it
see.
done.
I
You know, a
understand.
lot happened. A
Yeah.
lot happened. You know, a lot can happen in 2 year, 2, 3 years. So
Yeah, in 2, 3 years, a lot can happen indeed. But I'm thinking about the 30 stories that you had back there. That was all writing. You know, like sometimes the way we look at writing is only when we have published the book. That is when we are like, yeah, okay, I've written something. But you wrote at least 30 stories in your earlier years. What was like, is there like an inspiration that you felt I needed to just express these stories or?
I mean, it depends. Like, you know, when I was little, I used to come up with stories based on stuff, or around me. Like, for example, uh, in my house, my parents love to collect Yadros, and so um, so like even if though I never actually wrote any of them down, like I used to like to come up with stories by looking at some of, if any of them gave me, sometimes they would give me inspiration for stories. um, or like, I remember, my dad and I would walk around Macy's and look at the Yadros section, and like I try to come up with stories based around the ones that I saw. Again,
Yeah.
I don't remember these stories because this was 20 years ago.
Uh-huh.
um, but or like, I would look through like Barbie catalogs and try to come up with like basically like inspiration was everywhere to
Yeah,
me.
I see. Wow, that's amazing. And now that uh, Foolish Insanity, right? That's the title of the book, is out of the way and you've published it. Um, are you currently working on any other books?
Yes, I am currently working on my next one. Which I started, I want to say back at the beginning of the year, uh, before the pandemic hit.
Uh,
So I don't remember when I started. I want to say like December or January. Um, and so that one is completely different. It's definitely aimed for a younger audience because this has some stuff in it I would not recommend to kids. Like,
okay.
as someone who works with kids, when they find out that I've written a book, I'm like, I can't let you read this for another several years. I don't want you to be traumatized.
I get it. It's
But
wow. I see.
I mean, nothing like graphic or gratuitous,
Yeah.
but I mean, because I hate putting that stuff in just because. Like, if I ever put anything like that in my stories, there's always a reason.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And then
like, for example, I've on my Goodreads page, I have a collection of short horror stories that I've written. And again, like this, like there are some stuff in them
yeah,
that I would not recommend that kids see.
I understand.
But
Wow. Totally understand.
yeah.
And this was really amazing and inspiring, Julia. Thank you so much. Where can people buy your book?
It is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, although and it is available in both paperback and e-format on both sites. I would recommend though Amazon over Barnes and Noble just because I considering that it's been about a year already, I have not received any sales whatsoever through Barnes and Noble. I feel like part of that is because of me, because I always link the Amazon
Uh,
page, but at the same time, that's where all the reviews are. That's where all of the activity is. Like, there's no activity whatsoever on the Barnes and Noble
yeah.
page.
All right.
So
We'll put the link to Amazon with the interview so that people can access that. And how can
yeah.
people connect with you? If somebody is watching the interview and they would like to connect with Julia, what's the best way for them to reach you?
The best way would either be through, probably the best way would be through my Facebook page, which will include a link to, and that's where I post all of my updates as an author. It just, it's kind of empty, but at the same time, you know, I had all the stuff planned I wanted to do. Like I wanted to organize all these book signings and everything, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to really do much of anything. And basically, if and when, hopefully, it, you know, things pick up more and I'm able to, you know, there hasn't really been any information to update anyone on. So I'm hoping that once things go back to normal and, you know, I can actually go out and, you know, put together book signings and
Yeah.
whatnot, you know, post that information there. You know, I'd like to interact with my fans and followers. I just need more of them because
And
as of right now, there's, yeah.
I understand. Oh, thank you so much, Julia. This was great. Before we
Yeah.
finish the interview, is there anything else that you would like to share that I was not able to address in the interview?
Um, Not that I can think of, unless you have any questions um, as far as my, as you know, for me or my book, about my book
Yeah.
specifically, or about the next book I'm writing. Um, Unless you have any questions, I can't think of anything.
Wow, thank you so much. And this will be all. I'm so glad that we were able to do it.
Yeah, me too.